A friend of mine recently reached out to me and said, "Hey Ryan, should I go back to graduate school and get a master's degree in computer science?" Boy, that's a difficult question. In this video, I'm going to try to break it down, go through some of the pros and cons, and help you understand what you should be thinking about in order to make this type of decision. Stay tuned. Okay, why would he ask me? What do I know? Well, I went to graduate school. After I finished my bachelor's in electrical engineering, I worked for a year. It was in finance, and I realized I don't really want to do this. I'm going to go back to school. I wish I had known a little more about the pros and cons, thought about it a little bit more, known some of the information I'm going to give you in this video and throughout other videos in this channel. I didn't really know all that, so I just decided, hey, I'm going to go back to school. So after a year, I went back, did a master's and a PhD in mechanical engineering. Overall, it was a pretty mixed experience. I spent a full 7 years in graduate school, and so you don't know how long it's going to be with the PhD, especially going in. But in this video, I'm going to try to talk about what it would have been like, from the perspective of, hey, it's a master's degree, it's 2 years, we know what we're getting into. Okay, so this friend of mine, similar situation, kind of a mechanical engineering, test engineering background, but he managed to get into computer science, get into software engineering, if you will. So you're pretty much already halfway there, you figure. Why would you bother going back? It's going to cost you some money, it's going to take some time. What are even the benefits of doing that? And again, it depends on your situation. If you want to get into software and you don't really have any way to do that, this could be an increasingly attractive option. But if you're already in there, well, it's not going to help you get in because you're already in. So in graduate school, you're going to go deep into something. You're going to go a lot deeper than you go in an undergrad, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to go deeper than where you're going to go in industry. And especially these days, you'd think of graduate school, of academia, as doing really this cutting edge research. And to some extent that's true, because in academia, you're going to be able to do research that would never get funded in the industry because it doesn't yet have a clear profit incentive. Once something in academia gets researched and people start to get a whiff of the application and the value proposition of this type of technology, it starts to make its way out of the research labs, the academic labs, and into the industry, and then it gets a lot more funding. For a long time, artificial intelligence was the exclusive domain of academic research, but now you have huge companies like OpenAI and so on, where AI has obviously completely left the research labs, and you can't even do cutting edge research in academia practically anymore because you just don't, the level of funding isn't comparable to what is happening in the industry. But that being said, I think academia is always going to be a place where people are trying to lead the field. So depending on what you want to get into, if it's an area that, really hasn't made it out yet, I don't know what that would be off the top of my head, but if it's an area that hasn't made it out yet, that going back to graduate school to get a deeper understanding of that, and do some research opportunities in graduate school, that could be an interesting option. Maybe by the time you're finished, the application will be better understood and it'll be more widely used in the industry. In a bachelor's degree, you're going to get a pretty general education. Maybe some universities, to some extent, have different tracks and let you specialize in certain areas, but in a master's degree, you're going to be specializing to a much greater extent. So if you go into computer science, maybe you're going to specialize in compiler design, or you're going to specialize in artificial intelligence, or maybe even now a specific area of artificial intelligence. And that definitely has its pros and cons if you think about it. That specialization enables you to fill specific roles that require that deep knowledge of those areas. But on the other hand, they make you less attractive as a generalist because you've kind of overqualified yourself. They're like, well, why would we pay this person more? And this person's already kind of set in his ways with this type of approach. Whereas we could just take an undergraduate who's really could be molded really easily into this generalist role. And so, coming out with a master's degree, it may be hard to compete for some entry-level jobs compared to undergraduates coming out fresh out of a top school. Now, a lot of people say that a master's degree or PhD can help you advance in your career, and that may be true to some extent. It really depends who sees your resume, I think, ultimately. Maybe it can give you some credibility, but I would say not having it in most fields is not going to be a major hindrance to you progressing. you're going to be your biggest hindrance. In order to progress, it's not necessarily the skills that you're learning in school or the technical skills that are going to allow you to progress in your career, depending on what track you want to get into. If you want to sit alone in a room and code your whole life, then sure. But if you're looking to advance in the track of management, directing, development, executive level work, that's going to be more focused on soft skills, communication skills, and probably a lot of the stuff that you're going to learn in the master's program, not going to help you there at all. So if you have an opportunity, if you're weighing a decision of, well, should I, improve my communication skills, or should I go deeper into the technical skills? Depends what you want to do. Again, if you want to be, that genius in a cave that sits there coding, then, by all means, graduate school seems like the right choice. But if you are, want to have a more balanced set of skills and develop some of those soft skills, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, I think, if you're actually in the industry working, collaborating with people. Now, that's not to say you can't develop collaboration skills in graduate school. You can do a lot of collaboration, but it's definitely not the same as the kind of collaboration you're going to be doing working in industry. Okay, so another point is, let's say you want to change your career. Let's say you're in mechanical engineering and you want to get into software development, and you don't really have a whole lot of background in that. You're not really credible in that area. Nobody's really interviewing you. You're not doing well in interviews. Okay, you're definitely going to need to learn the material better than you currently know it. You're going to need to go back to school probably, and you're going to need to study that material, and then hopefully you'll be qualified to go into an entry-level position. So the company has to make a decision because they're hiring for a software position. Well, you're not a senior software engineer. You don't really have any experience in it. So if they're going to take someone who has entry-level experience, why take someone who they have to pay more because you're older? You do have some experience. It's just not relevant experience. So oftentimes it might be hard for you to compete with undergraduates. Now, graduate school can be pretty expensive. And again, this really depends on the field you're going into. It depends on the deal you work out with the university. That's something you can negotiate. When I went to graduate school, I didn't pay anything. I had to do a research assistantship where you're supposed to work 20 hours a week for a professor doing research. And then they pay for your education, the tuition and fees and so on. And they give you a small stipend. Depending on where you live, you're going to get a different stipend that's going to account for the cost of living. But generally, it's not a lot of money. You're going to make very little. I think some people were making $1,200 a month when I was in graduate school at Texas A&M. It's hard to imagine. I mean, that's $14,000 a year, plus tuition and fees. But obviously, in terms of money that you can spend, you're going to be pretty broke. And if you go and work and get a job, you're going to be making a lot more than that. So the opportunity cost of being in graduate school is pretty high. You're not going to be able to save for retirement, invest money. You're going to be really scraping to make ends meet. Probably going to have to take out loans. So it's not nearly as bad as like law school or medical school, but it is going to be pretty expensive. Now, you could do a simple calculation and just say, well, how expensive is it going to be? Can I still work while I'm doing this, for example? Could I do it part-time? Maybe that's a better option. Maybe you could work full-time and go 20 hours a week graduate school. That's kind of reasonable if you don't mind stretching it out. But again, you are going to be paying those fees unless you're also doing a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. Now, another problem is you can get to graduate school and the curriculum could be outdated before you even start learning it. How does this happen? Well, as I mentioned, there's research breakthroughs, and then all of a sudden people get a whiff of, hey, this could be a really valuable technology. And then it starts becoming really, the industry starts spending a lot of money on it. And then all of the breakthroughs are made in Google's research labs or in Microsoft or OpenAI's research labs. And so all of a sudden, they're doing stuff that's now more advanced than what you're learning in school. And so you're learning this. And so you're now spending this money to learn information that maybe some of it's applicable, but a lot of it's outdated. And so, you might just be better suited to go and actually learn it hands-on working in the industry in some cases. Now, this is particularly interesting with the recent breakthroughs in these large language models like OpenAI's ChatGPT, for example. Now, I think about my life, and I've been programming a really long time, since I was just a kid, about 30 years probably. And I spent all that time tried to get really good at it and became an expert in it. But now when I look at ChatGPT, I don't even want to code without it, because I just ask it to, hey, this is what I want to design, and it gives me the basic implementation, saves a ton of time. So, is it really useful in the future world that we're going into? How well do you actually have to know how to code if AI is going to be able to do a lot of it for you? And that's really alarming. And we don't, I'm sure there's analogs and parallels to this, but I can't really think of one that's comparable to this. We have classes of, work that previously we thought, well, computers can't really do this work, but now computers can do it in a lot of cases better than people. I mean, some of these large language models like GPT-4 can pass the bar exam in like the 80th percentile. And by the time I'm even saying this, that information could be outdated. It could be the 90th percentile. And so because of how quickly technology is moving, it's really hard for me to in good conscience say, hey, you should go to school and learn computer science the traditional way. Now, will there always be a place for computer scientists? Probably in the foreseeable future. But I think a lot of the work, learning and understanding how to use these new tools, these new AI-based tools, generative AI, is going to give you a lot more bang for your buck than actually really getting super solid on the fundamentals and thinking you're going to go into industry and be doing stuff by hand the old way, the way things are largely still done today. But, I think when you're thinking about what should I be learning, what's the trajectory of my career, I think you need to extrapolate. You need to look and see the world, even though it's never been like this and it's hard to envision that it could be. You really need to just open your mind, think outside the box and say, well, geez, the world's really going to change in ways that, people today can't even comprehend. And so really you should be skating toward the puck. What do you need to learn to be competitive in the future job market? Another issue with going to graduate school is, you're not getting that work experience, right? The work that you do as a research assistant, as a teaching assistant, maybe even you do a co-op, it's not nearly the same thing. So unless you have an opportunity to really work on something you love, on some cutting edge technology that there is no comparable part in industry, I would say that working in industry in terms of work experience definitely gets an edge here. Now, the thing about graduate school, depending on your advisor and so on and your circumstances, you may have more of an opportunity to work on the things that you want to work on. And anytime you get a job, you need to work on the things that the company needs you to work on. And maybe some companies have some rule where you can make your own decisions some percent of the time, but by and large, you're going to have to be doing the thing that you were hired to do, or the thing that your job is evolving to have you do. And so if you find something else interesting, you're going to be studying that in your spare time. Whereas if you're in graduate school, you may be able to study that, write some papers on it. That may be your thesis topic. You may be able to do it not in your spare time. So that can definitely be an advantage of going to graduate school. One final point I want to make is that not all graduate schools are created equal. It's not only about what you learn, but it's also about the name and the network. So when you go to graduate school, you're going to have the opportunity to network. You can obviously do that in work, but when you're in graduate school, you're going to have colleagues, classmates, and then later on in your career, you may run into these people again. I seem to run into a lot of the people I knew from undergrad. It doesn't probably hurt that I live in the same town that my undergraduate is in. But I do tend to run into these people, even if they're 10 classes before me or something like this. And so your network is going to be really important, and you can actually build a network in graduate school in a way that you may not be able to do, or can only do in a limited way in certain positions in the industry. And so if you do choose to go to graduate school, make sure you spend time focusing on your network, on building up your network, on getting to know the right people, not necessarily as many people, although that's useful, but really find the people who are interested in the things you're interested in, who you'll be able to help each other later on in life, and nurture those relationships. Now, I've reviewed a lot of resumes and done a lot of hiring, and I will say that a master's degree even a PhD doesn't necessarily give someone an edge in my mind over a bachelor's degree. I'm definitely looking at what school did this person go to? Did they put their GPA on there, and is it really good? What kind of projects did they do? What are their hobbies and interests, right? It's really hard to look at a resume and know if that person's going to be right for the job. And I've been right, I've been wrong. But again, give somebody with a master's degree, people vary so widely. So someone just having a master's degree doesn't make you 10 times better than another candidate. And so I think, at least in my case, I would say that recruiters are probably looking for those 10x candidates, the ones who are really amazing, who can do phenomenal work. And those come in all shapes and sizes. They don't necessarily come with fancy degrees from fancy universities. I should also mention that not all universities are equal, not all degrees are equal. And you might say, well, I only went to this second-tier university, but I got a really good education, it was a really good job. And that may be true. You could read Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath. It offers some really great perspective and examples on how that may actually be the case. It may be better to be a big fish in a small pond versus a small fish in a big pond. But whether or not that is true empirically, that doesn't necessarily make it into the minds of the recruiters, into who's doing the hiring. And so I still think that, yes, there is going to be that bias. If you went to MIT or Caltech or Carnegie Mellon or something, and you're comparing that to, well, I went to some state school. I'm not going to name one because, but if I think there's going to be the recruiters are going to look at that and be like, well, obviously these guys, this guy must be much better. And I think there's a good justification for that. To get into a top school, you already have to go through a pretty substantial filtering process. So if you get into a great school and you do really well in that school, boy, I have to think that's indicative of what your job performance could be. It should be predictive of that. But on the other hand, like I said, those 10Xers, those really special people come from in all shapes and sizes, from all backgrounds and universities. And there's something intangible about certain people. But if you're a recruiter and you're looking through 1,000 resumes, 100 resumes, and you spend 30 seconds looking at it, that may not come across. So I think what that means is, even though you might say, hey, let me choose this university that's second tier versus this higher tier one, that might not be the right decision to make. I can't necessarily, in good conscience, say I would advise you to do that. But definitely, I would say don't pay a lot of money for graduate school, especially in a STEM program. If you're in sociology or something, sure, most people aren't getting funded. You're going to have to pay for it. Okay, and that's fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But if you're going into a STEM field, someone will pay for your education, or else they don't think that it's worth investing in you. And, then maybe you're in the wrong area in that case, and you should figure out how else your special talents and skills and interests can best help you make money by moving the world forward. So that's the video. I hope you found these considerations helpful. There's obviously so many different things that you could think about when going into graduate school, and it's a really hard decision for a lot of people, and there's definitely some emotional aspect. I wish I could give you a spreadsheet you could fill out, and maybe I'll try, but that you could fill out and know if you should go to graduate school or not. But nonetheless, I hope this has provided you with some insight. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to push the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna do a lot more videos about this kind of stuff. This isn't the first time I've been asked this question, and I think I've spent a long time in graduate school, spent a lot of time thinking about this, talking with people about it, and so I'm gonna try to share some more of my perspective, at least, whether it's right or wrong, on this channel. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.